Hello everyone, and welcome to this Diablo 3 dungeon guide for the Demon Hunter, the Shadows Mantle set. We'll be going over how to set up your character, and I'll also explain how to complete both primary dungeon objectives. Keep watching until the end to see a full playthrough of the entire set dungeon with additional tips. To get started, let's first take a look at the set bonuses so we'll know how to gear out our character. This set is extremely straightforward. It provides a major damage bonus to Impale, which is the main damage dealing skill for the build. It also provides an additional damage buff for using a melee weapon in lieu of a ranged bow or crossbow. And the Shadow Power skill gains the effects from all runes, providing some peripheral benefits. Impale is mandatory for completing one of the primary dungeon objectives, and it will need to be set up as a single target attack. It costs Hatred to cast, so Hatred generation will be the limiting factor to killing all the monsters and completing the dungeon in time. Cooldown reduction will be important for casting on-demand hatred generating skills often. Shadow Power is also mandatory for completing one of the primary dungeon objectives. It costs Discipline to cast, but Discipline generation isn't nearly as important as hatred generation, since your Shadow Power casts can be spaced out much more than Impale. Therefore, considering all of this, hatred generation, resource cost reduction, cooldown reduction, and to a lesser degree attack speed will be the main priorities for the gearing and skills setup. In this setup, we are using 5 of the 6 set pieces in the shoulders, torso, hands, legs, and feet slots. In the head slot, we have Leoric's Crown, which provides increased resource cost reduction with a topaz equipped in the helm. In the wrist slot, we take Reaper's Wraps for increased hatred generation. And in the waist slot, we have Chain of Shadows, which reduces the discipline cost of the Vault skill and has great synergy with this build that uses Impale. In the main hand slot, we have Carle's Point, which provides buffs to the Impale skill. And in the offhand slot, there are no overly beneficial quivers, so take anything that has good stats. However, do not take the Impale-based quiver Holy Point shot, as it will impede your ability to make progress on one of the dungeon objectives. In the next slot, we have a Hellfire Amulet. There are a few passives that may provide a small benefit. In one of the finger slots, we have Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac, which provides some good cooldown reduction. And in the other finger slot, we have Elusive Ring, which provides a toughness increase. When it comes to rerolling stats in the gear, the top priorities are cooldown reduction, resource cost reduction, and attack speed, as mentioned previously. Then take anything that increases damage output. A higher attack speed stat will help crank out more Impale cast, consuming more hatred, but it will also help generate more hatred through the use of Grenade, which is our primary hatred generator skill. Make sure to avoid the area damage stat on any gear piece, as it will interfere with completing one of the primary dungeon objectives. If any gear pieces already have it, make sure to reroll it to a different stat. For Kanai's Cube in the weapon slot, we have Echoing Fury, which provides increases to both attack speed and movement speed. In the armor slot, we take Hunter's Wrath for increased attack speed and damage on our hatred generator skill, Grenade. And in the jewelry slot, we have Ring of Royal Grandeur, which allows us to gain the 6-piece set bonus while only having 5 of the 6 set pieces equipped. For gems, we have a Topaz in the head slot for resource cost reduction, emeralds in the torso and leg slots, and an emerald in the weapon slot. For legendary gems, we have Bane of the Powerful, Bane of the Trapped, and Zay's Stone of Vengeance, all for increased damage. For Paragon, the main priorities are movement speed, maximum hatred, cooldown reduction, attack speed, and resource cost reduction. Do not assign any points into area damage, as it will interfere with completing one of the primary dungeon objectives. Next, let's go over the skills. We'll be using Impale with the Grievous Wounds rune, which is mandatory for the dungeon and will be our main damage dealing skill. Next, we have Shadow Power, which is also mandatory. The rune choice doesn't matter since the 4-piece set bonus provides the effect of every rune. Next, we take Companion with the Bat Companion rune, and Preparation with the Punishment rune. Both of these skills provide on-demand hatred generation and should be cast whenever their cooldown is expired to maintain our hatred level. Next, we take Grenade with the Tinkerer rune, which generates hatred with each cast. This skill should be used when hatred is low and both the Companion and Preparation skills are on cooldown. And then we have Vault for some increased mobility. We take the Acrobatics rune to save our discipline for the Shadow Power skill. However, if you have the Chain of Shadows belt equipped, you can select the Tumble rune for further increased mobility. For the passive skills, we have Blood Vengeance for increased hatred generation. And then Tactical Advantage and Hot Pursuit, both which provide increased movement speed. And lastly, we take Night Stalker for additional increased hatred generation. Now let's go over the dungeon objectives. The first primary dungeon objective is to chain consecutive bonus damage Impale hits on 20 different enemies 5 times. The set bonuses inherently provide the mentioned bonus damage, so all you need to do is hit enemies with Impale. To successfully chain hits together, you will simply need to ensure you always hit a monster with each Impale. You can cast Impale multiple times on the same enemy and the streak will stay alive. You just need to hit 20 different monsters. While you need to connect on consecutive hits with Impale, you don't have to cast Impale 20 consecutive times. You can cast other spells in between, like your hatred generators, as often as needed. Generally, the closer you stand to a monster, the less accurate you will need to be with your shots. To more reliably complete this objective, don't cast Impale while you or the monsters are moving. First, get close, preferably in melee range with the monsters, and come to a stop. Then, cast Shadow Power if you have sufficient discipline available to slow the enemies, particularly on larger packs. Then, line up your Impale, take the shot, and repeat. This will give you a better chance of connecting on each hit. The closer you are, the more forgiving each cast will be. There is a counter for the impale hits if you're curious about your progress, but you shouldn't need to look at it. There is no timer associated with it, so just take your time making careful, methodical progress through the dungeon. You will want to make sure to avoid all area damage on gear and in Paragon points. An area damage proc can kill monsters when you don't expect it, taking away an enemy that could have been used to continue a kill streak or making you miss on your next impale cast. Also avoid skills or legendary powers that do any kind of AoE damage other than the grenade skill as part of this build. Most of the monsters will need to be killed with Impale, and since you'll only be able to hit one enemy at a time, and each Impale cast costs Hatred, your Hatred levels will drop quickly and often. To counter this, make sure you cast your Companion and Preparation skills when they're off cooldown. Don't wait for your Hatred to be completely empty. If both of these skills are on cooldown and you find yourself empty on Hatred, then shoot grenades several times to get a refill. Don't waste grenade shots into empty space. Go ahead and hit monsters. Assuming you are disciplined about your impales and don't mess up many of the 20 enemy kill streaks, then you will have plenty of enemies in the dungeon to get the objective done. You don't want to unnecessarily waste time not doing damage to enemies, because you may run out of time. A good approach throughout the dungeon is to lead off with a grenade shot, then follow up with an impale. Casting grenade in this fashion every once in a while will help you keep Hatred topped off. If you get completely empty on Hatred, then it can really throw off your rhythm with casting Impale. The second primary dungeon objective is to slow 45 different enemies with your Shadow Power skill. The Nightbane rune, which is granted by the 4-piece set bonus, slows enemies, so all you need to do is cast Shadow Power when near monsters. Even though the 4-piece set bonus provides the passive effect of every rune, you will need to cast the skill to trigger the slow effect and make progress on the objective. This second primary dungeon objective syncs up nicely with the first one. As mentioned previously, the best approach is to run up to a group of monsters and slow them with Shadow Power. This will make it easier to make connection with your Impale skill, since monsters will have a harder time sidestepping your Impale shots. So try to put the slowdown as much as possible, even after you've completed the first objective. If you can get into the habit of always casting Shadow Power in this fashion, particularly on the larger packs of monsters, then it will make this second objective trivial. Next, let's take a look at the dungeon map. This dungeon is quite large, but luckily if you take the right route, it is rather linear. Just make sure as you go to clear any areas that you won't pass by again. You will not have time to make a second pass looking for stragglers during a single dungeon attempt. So follow this main route and clear any side rooms or passages along the way. There are no features about the dungeon layout that require special attention associated with the set mechanics or dungeon objectives. Just make sure to not hit any pieces of the environment when casting Impale to keep your kill streaks alive. So now that you have the setup and you know how to approach the dungeon, let's head to it. Go to Act 5. Then to the Pandemonium Fortress Level 2 waypoint. From there, head west, passing through a series of Deathgate portals, and take the portal to the Pandemonium Fortress Level 3. The dungeon entrance is right at the drop-off location. And next, we'll look at the playthrough. For this run, I went with very bare-bones gear to demonstrate techniques. Any additional items or stats that you get, consistent with the recommendations earlier, will give you a much easier time completing the dungeon. Once inside the dungeon, cast Shadow Power to activate the buffs and head out. Getting close to enemies, cast Shadow Power, then start picking them off one at a time with Impale. The large elite monsters are good first priority targets. You'll quickly run out of Hatred with the amount of Impales that are needed, so be ready to cast Companion and Preparation to get an easy refill, then just keep repeating the cycle. There's our first streak of 20. If you get low on Hatred while Companion and Preparation are on cooldown, then shoot grenades several times. It won't interrupt your Impale kill streaks and you'll continue pumping out damage. Note that the first time you hit a skeleton that's holding a shield, he will drop the shield, and you will then have to hit him again to kill him. This double hit requirement can throw you off your rhythm if you're not prepared for it. There's streak number 2 of 5. In larger packs of monsters, casting Grenade will do some AoE damage, and it is a cheap way to knock off shields from the shield-wearing skeletons, instead of wasting Hatred to cast 2 Impales to kill them off. There's streak number 3 of 5. We were a little too hasty there and missed on one of the Impales, resetting the 4th kill streak. Don't rush casting Impale. It is easy to run out of monsters for the objective if you break your 20 enemy streak progress too many times. Since you'll need 5 20 enemy streaks, you'll need 100 out of the approximately 170 total monsters in the dungeon to count toward the objective. Make sure each monster is actually still alive before you cast your next Impale. It can be very painful to lose out on a high kill count streak when you miss on one of the last monsters. Remember to periodically cast Shadow Power. There, we completed the second primary dungeon objective with plenty of time remaining, and we completed the 4th kill streak. This junction we'll be passing by again, so leaving some stragglers here is okay. All other areas of the dungeon we won't be returning to, so make sure you clear all the enemies as you go. You won't have much time remaining toward the end. Killing every monster one at a time with Impale is very time consuming. In larger packs of monsters, leverage the AoE damage of the grenade skill to clear monsters out faster than shooting each individually with Impale. This will also conserve your hatred. And we completed the first primary dungeon objective. Now we can just focus on clearing the remaining enemies. Unfortunately, we don't have any big area damage skills to switch over to with this gear set, so we'll still have to kill most monsters individually with Impale. While we won't have to be as disciplined with casting for the sake of the kill streaks, we'll still want to be careful not to miss too much and waste hatred. When you're still working on the first objective, getting in close to the enemies will help you avoid missing or hitting a piece of the environment and resetting your kill streaks. When running between packs of monsters, leverage the Tactical Advantage passive skill after casting either Vault or Shadow Power for its run speed increase. When you're working on the second objective, Shadow Power does cost discipline to cast, so if you happen to run out of discipline, don't worry about it and keep making progress. Just cast it whenever you have the discipline available again. Remember to cast Grenade into a pack of skeletons to knock off any shields, then finish them off with Impale. This can save you some precious seconds on the dungeon timer. If you're having trouble finishing the dungeon within the time limit, then you will probably just need to practice a few times to get the route and playstyle figured out. You should have enough damage output to kill monsters with one hit. The monsters in this dungeon are pretty weak, so you shouldn't need much to get to that point. If you need help completing the dungeon in time, you should try to get more attack speed, particularly with the Echoing Fury and Hunter's Wrath legendary powers in the cube, and cast your hatred generators liberally when you need to refill. And do not assign a follower for this dungeon, they will just get in the way and throw you off your Impale casting rhythm. Make sure you uncover all of the minimap to ensure no monsters get left behind. Just a couple of monsters remaining. And we're done. Good luck trying to finish this one. If you enjoyed the guide and would like to see more content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.